Oh, greetings. This is Reverend Sharon Almond. I am delighted to be with you today, even if it is virtually. I look forward to the day when we're face to face in the same room, but until then, I'm honored to be able to share this time with you. These are such amazing and interesting times, and that's kind of the core of what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about our new normal. We are in the midst of a pandemic, as you know. It seems strange to remember that just 2 months ago we were living as we've always lived. We were out and about and doing all of the normal things. And now, 2 months later, we're in the midst of this pandemic. This is global. The entire world is affected by this. It's changed, for us, it's changed our lives dramatically. These changes, I've read and heard that if you want a habit, if you want to create a habit, if you do the same thing for 21 days, it can be a habit. I can tell you for me, I don't particularly want this way of living to be a habit. This is a significant event, this pandemic. This, unless you were alive through the 1918 flu epidemic, then this is new for all of us. This is a significant event. When I was at Bell back in the day, I had a training. It was done by a man, I believe his name was Raymond Massey. He had a presentation that was called "You Are What You Were When," and his premise was that the values and the beliefs that you hold were established by the time you were 10 years old. And after that, you could change, but it would take a significant emotional event to do that, to change, to shift some of those beliefs and values. I think that this qualifies most certainly with a significant emotional event, for sure. And even though this pandemic is enormous and worldwide and so forth, but we've all experienced significant events that mark time for us, right? So we often think of time in terms of before my child was born, or after this event, or these events mark time. Birth, I can tell you. Usually, I can tell you if something happened before or after the birth of either one of my children. Losses will do that too. We often can remember distinctly those markers, those times that differentiate the before and after. A significant move, a significant change or a move, which can be very significant in our lives. Before I lived in this state or after I lived in that state. So there are all these things that mark time, and clearly this pandemic, we're going to be saying for years it was before the pandemic or after the pandemic. This is a significant emotional event. And because it is one, we might find ourselves longing for the way things were. There was a movie that I enjoyed years back. I don't even remember when it came out, but Goldie Hawn was the star. It was called Private Benjamin. She enlisted in the military, and the scene that I remember is her marching around in the rain in her uniform and saying, "I just want to go to lunch." It's kind of like that. I would love to go to lunch. I would love to go to sit down in a Mexican restaurant. That's what I would like. There are so many things that are affecting us. This pandemic has changed for us that we maybe long for. Touch. Oh my gosh, touch. I haven't touched a real person, a human being, a couple months now. I live alone, and thank goodness for my dogs, my canine companions, but I consider myself kind of a touchy-feely person, and so to not touch another person it's a thing. Now, the pandemic has changed a lot that we might be longing for, and my longing for touch is, down the scale of what we might be longing for. Work is an area where many are affected. Some aren't able to work. Their jobs are non-essential, so they're just held until later. They'll open back. Hopefully they'll open back later. Restaurants fit into that category. So I'll have to wait for a while on my Mexican for a bit. Work could be that you're in the health industry, and that is truly significant, and you may be longing for the days when you didn't have to wear full garb, protective equipment all the time, and be scrambling for that equipment and those resources that have affected everyone. So many people are out of work. I think I read that so many million people in Missouri I'm not sure if it's just Missouri. So many people, millions, have applied for unemployment. Work is a huge one. Social, besides just the touch, social is an area that is radically changed. To have to remember to stay at least 6 feet away from everyone is quite a thing. And then there's the fear. We might be longing for the days before we were afraid, so very afraid. We might be afraid of catching the virus. We might be afraid of our loved ones, our children, our grandchildren catching the virus. We might be afraid for financial reasons. Many are. Many don't know when the next paycheck is going to come, and so their mortgages, their leases, their utilities, all the things are up in the air, and it can be very frightening. It can be a very scary time. So there is often great longing in this period of time, right now. But as we think about this event, and even with this longing, can we go back? Can we go back to the way it was? I want to introduce you to something that I received a few days ago. I am on the mailing list for Reverend Chris Chenoweth, and he has an online ministry called Positive Christianity. A few days ago I got this, and I thought it was very timely. He says, there's an ancient word that I wish to teach to you today. The word abacatastasis means what looks like disaster today, God will turn into good tomorrow. Abacatastasis. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. What looks like disaster today, God will turn into good tomorrow. We'll come back to that some more in just a minute. So I was saying that often you can't go back when these significant emotional events, significant events anyway, when they occur, that which marks the time, you can't go back to before whatever happened. Sometimes there's no going back. If you've ever, and I'm sure you have, lost a loved one, there's no going back. There is no before this person died. They're gone. And so you're left to build a life around it, around that loss, to go forward from here or from that death. Even something as joyous as a birth, that's a celebration most of the time, and there's no going back. Once you have a child, you can't just pick up and go. You have to be sure you're taking care of your child. You are going to be attached to this person for the rest of their lives, hopefully. There's no going back. It kind of reminds me, or I was reminded anyway, as I was thinking about this whole topic and this talk, I was reminded of the apostles. So I'd like for you to imagine with me for a moment what that must have been like for them when they were disciples, when they were learning, they were following Jesus, they were learning from him, They considered him their leader, their master teacher. And the events of the crucifixion, then he died. They saw him die. And then a few days later, they saw him alive again. And then he told them, they were told by him to go to Jerusalem, and he would meet them there. Now, Jerusalem metaphysically means place of peace, so it's not surprising. But just imagine if you were the disciple, and you have seen your beloved teacher die and then come back, which would be a shock by itself. And then they were told to go to Jerusalem and wait for him there. They did, and he told them, the Holy Spirit will come upon you. And then he instructed them to go out and teach and preach and all of the things that he was giving to them, their mission, if you will. So again, I wonder, here they have just been through these events, and they're being instructed to be apostles now. They are going out to teach and preach and heal and all of that teach the good news. How amazing that would have been. So we can't go back. An event has happened. What if we tried? What if we tried to go back? Sometimes there is no going back. If you've lost a loved one, and I know some people who have done this, it's like they can't let go of that loss, of that person. So they might keep the person's clothes, their things, and stay, have all those things around them. What's happening is they're blocking themselves. They're rooted. They've stuck themselves in the past, in what was. If the event was a birth, and you try to hold on, even that would be, you can't, without harming yourself and or the child, you can't pretend or go back to the way it was before the child was born. What we do when we try to go back to the way things were is, like I said, living in the past. And when we live in the past, we are cutting off that flow. Myrtle Fillmore refers to that urging, that yearning that is within us. That is God pushing us to, or expanding us to be more Christ-like, for us to be more of who we have come here to be. And to be rooted in the past is to shut that flow off, so we get stuck. Well, what are we to do? Let me share with you then the rest of what Chenoweth says in this apokatastasis. He says, when a bad thing happens to you, say apokatastasis, to remind yourself that God's good will come to pass in the most surprising and uplifting ways. And he has a story that he shares. There was a woman that lost her job in a town where there were no other opportunities. She started to think of herself as an unfortunate victim and destined to suffer. You ever felt that way? It's like, nothing can change this. I'm just stuck. Then she said to herself, apokatastasis, to again remind herself that she was not alone. She prayed, and God gave her the idea to move to a larger city and look for another job. Times were tough for a while, and the change was difficult. She struggled on the little money that she had left. Each day, God was fortifying her with inner strength. She was led by God to apply for a different type of job than she had ever done before. She got the job, and she said later that the new job fed her soul. She felt needed and wanted in the new workplace. She felt valued, and eventually rose within the company to become a vice president. She said that getting laid off was the luckiest thing that God had ever happened to her, but she was blind to it at the time. So when something bad happens to you, I ask you to say this word aloud, apokatastasis, to again remind yourself that God is your help in every need and will turn this misfortune around to bless your life. That story, saying that word to remind yourself that God is always there and so forth, much like what Unity refers to as the golden key. And the golden key is when we find ourselves just focusing on something, some misfortune, some challenge that we have, the golden key is to shift, to direct our attention, our energy on God. And when we do that, we open that space for alignment, to remember and to align it once more into that which we really are, one with our Creator. Apocatastasis, the golden key, all of those things get us aligned to be able to do something different. So that something different is, in the midst of this pandemic, is to see it as an opportunity to create a new normal. What we might want to do is to take a look at before, take a look at this time that we've been in this mode, this pandemic mode. There probably are things that you like, that you would like to keep. I have been able to clean up and organize some spaces that I've been putting off for a long time. I've gotten to appreciate the quiet. I am certainly very close to my beloved fur babies. There are definitely some wonderful things that I've experienced in this time. It has also allowed me to deepen and to think and just contemplate where I am, what I want, what I truly want. And in that looking and then evaluating, I and all of us get a chance to figure out what we might want to change. What would we want to release? What would we want to create new? What might we want to add, change, or delete? We can create a new normal, and this is our opportunity. This time, this pandemic will go down in the history books, definitely. We've read, my parents went through the Depression. That is lots more recently than the Spanish flu that came around before. But we are all going to be involved in this pandemic and then the aftermath. This time is changing us. You can't stand, even if you go back to a river and stand in the same place you stood before, the water is different. It's moving all the time. We can't go back to the way we were. We are changed because of this pandemic. And with this awareness of God's ever-presence, with this awareness that God only wants good for us and is our willing partner, our supplier, our biggest cheerleader, knowing all of that, this is an opportunity. We get to choose. We get to choose what the new normal is. So if we're choosing a new normal, let me suggest that a new normal would be one that supports life, supports love, supports joy and peace and all of the good for ourselves, for our loved ones, and indeed for the entire world. Let's create an amazing new way of life. A new normal.